All right, good morning and welcome to Live from Currituck Extension. My name is Adam Vermilla. I'm the county's agriculture extension agent, and today we're going to go over pesticide safety. But before we begin, make sure you click the subscribe button and click the little bell so you're notified when we go live and when we post new videos. Check out all of the links in our description. We've got one for our website so you can contact us. We've got one for our 2020 Eggcam Manual. That's this big book here, and I'll talk more about it today. It's huge, but we've got a copy online. That link has the copy so you can look through that when we're making pesticide decisions. So definitely check out that link. We've got links to our social media so you can see what we're doing, and then an evaluation form that we use to modify these videos, but also to make new content. So we recommend that you can fill that out if you have the time. So we're going to begin talking about pesticide safety, and I want this video to be focused on how to apply pesticides safely. If you maybe are a little bit scared of pesticides or you don't know what to do, hopefully this video will help you out there. Of course, if you have any questions about that, add them to the chat or send me an email if you're watching this recorded. But I didn't want this video to be controversial. I'm going to try to avoid those topics. You know, if you want to spray pesticides, great. If you hate pesticides, that's fine too. And if you have things that are controversial, you can email me if they're questions, but we're going to try to keep those out of the chat for today's video. So we're going to go and get started by talking about our overview, and we're going to start with myths debunked. That's a lot of misinformation out there about pesticides, and so we're going to clear up a little bit of that, but mostly our goal is to provide research-based information, and so we're a great resource to look to when you start to see some of these odd articles in the news, whether it's online, social media, that kind of thing. We'll talk about some terminology too, so you know the differences between different types of pesticides. We'll talk about understanding the label, and that's probably the most crucial thing you can do when we're talking about pesticides, knowing what to spray, when to spray, that kind of thing. That's all on the label. And then we'll talk about choosing the correct pesticide with our 2020 Eggcam Manual. Of course, if you have any questions, just type them in the chat and ask them as we go, or shoot me an email if you're watching this recorded. So I wanted to start with this myths because there's a lot of information out there that's not credible, and we're trying to be a source of credible, reliable information that's research-based. So it's peer-reviewed. A lot of professors have looked over this stuff and then put it out there. And so there's a lot of things that you might find that might mislead you. So this is just an article that I found that says new study shows Roundup kills bees. And Roundup is an herbicide. The ending "icide" means that it kills. So all pesticides kill, that's their goal. Herbicides kill plants. And so this article says that Roundup, or glyphosate, that's the chemical name, kills bees, and herbicide kills bees. And so I read through the article thinking that's interesting. And then I found where they cited peer-reviewed journals, which is always great. That's where you should get your resources from. But this one said that the Roundup bothers the bees, the bacteria in its stomach, kind of like how antibiotics, if you have an infection, they can upset your stomach. That's how it works for the bees. And they said because of this, it kills a bunch of bees. But unfortunately, that's not what the research paper showed. Research paper just said that it makes bees sick. They didn't specify if it kills bees, and they didn't measure that. So this is just one example of some misinformation out there that can lead you to believe that pesticides are the end of the world, that they're killing everything. And another bit of misinformation is that organic means pesticide-free, and that's just not true. Organic means that you're spraying organic pesticides, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But here's a list of all of those organic things, and there's plenty others that aren't on there that can be sprayed and are sprayed to reduce pests, whether it's to get rid of weeds, or if you have diseases like bacteria and fungus, or even to kill insects. So organic doesn't mean pesticide-free. So we're going to talk about some terminology, and this is some of the important things that you need to know about pesticides and how they work. And we talked a little bit about natural pesticides, but natural is pesticides, and it looks like a screen's not showing up there. Natural means that it's derived from nature with little to no modification. Often it's coming from plants or bacteria. They're usually defensive compounds. So if a plant is fed on, it produces these compounds to reduce insect feeding. Or they can even do it for herbicides. So if you're familiar with black walnut trees, when they drop the nuts, the little hull or the husk around them has an herbicide that kills plants near it, so that new seed can grow up into a new walnut tree. So that's pretty cool things that our plants do. And those are natural ones that we can make into pesticides. Synthetic, on the other hand, means they're man-made. And oftentimes they're modified versions of our natural ones. And they do it to increase the toxicity. And that just means how well they work, how lethal they are, or increase how selective they are, or change what I say hydrophobicity. That means how it's delivered. So sometimes things can't be put to water, so they'll change those properties. And so here's a great example of that. So this is a picture of a chrysanthemum or a mum, and they have natural insecticidal properties. And so we've taken those and harnessed them, and we've made pyrethrum, which is natural, it comes from those plants. Kills a wide range of insects, but unfortunately, it doesn't last very long. So if you put it out, it's broken down really quickly by the sun, and that really limits how effective it can be. So it's been modified by us, made synthetic, into pyrethroids. And bifenthrin is an example of one of those. A lot of farmers spray it to get rid of stink bugs. It's one that lasts a little bit longer and therefore is more toxic because it's in the environment longer. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's awful, some kind of weird thing made up in a lab. Yes, it was made in a lab, but it's based off of something from nature. So then we're going to talk about two different terms that mean how it kills, being contact or systemic. And contact is basically what the name implies. It kills by what the droplets or the granulars touch. So if it's water, every little one of those droplets either burns or kills what it touches. For that reason, you need better coverage because it's just going to die at each little one of those areas if you're spraying an herbicide. Systemic, on the other hand, means that it's taken up, and that's usually by a plant. So if you think about an herbicide, those herbicides are taken up and then it kills the plant. Insecticides work the same way, though. A lot of times you spray them on plants, like if you have maybe vegetables in your garden, you spray them, the vegetables take up those plants, and then when insects feed, it kills the insects. And for this reason, you only need a small amount of systemic insecticides. You don't need quite as good of coverage. And here's some images of what that would look like. So this is a picture of a contact herbicide damage. So you'll be able to see, if you sprayed a contact, you would see those little burn marks. And this is poor coverage. You want it to completely cover those leaves. Systemic, on the other hand, will result in the entire plant yellowing because it's taking that up. And Roundup is a systemic. This is just a picture of a jug of glyphosate, which is the chemical name. But the plant takes it up and it slowly kills off all those plant tissues. So the last thing we're going to talk about is selective versus non-selective. And this is what it kills. So selective is specific. It only kills maybe one group, whether that's one group of insects, so caterpillars or beetles, or things like grasses. And it can be a valuable tool when we're talking about an integrated pest management approach. And I won't explain it too much, but that approach is a way that we can try to benefit our environment by not killing all of the insects or weeds, just the amount that we can tolerate in our system. So if you have a garden, maybe you can tolerate a couple worms in your orchard or things like that in your tomatoes. You don't need to necessarily kill them all. So selective can be great because it's only killing a small section of the pests. Non-selective, on the other hand, kill a wide range of species. They're indiscriminate, and that can be useful too when you're combating multiple species. So if you've got a garden and you've got maybe beans that have stink bugs and worms and Japanese beetles, you can spray something that'll kill all of them. That can be really beneficial. Or you can put it in something like a flower bed that's full of weeds and you just want to kill all those weeds off. So that's one use of selective, or if you don't know the species. We always recommend trying to figure out what you're going to be trying to kill. But if, sometimes beetles look like bugs and sometimes moths look like wasps, it can be really difficult. So just non-selective can work for those instances too. And so here's a great example of an insecticide. On the left, we have Monterey BT, and I've talked about BT a lot. It's from a bacteria, it's natural, and it's selective because it will only kill caterpillars. So this bacteria produces a protein that binds in the caterpillar's gut, and it only kills caterpillars, and it only kills caterpillars that feed on whatever you spray it on. So if you're worried about monarchs, you don't spray it on the milkweed and you won't kill the monarchs. It's great because they've got one that's selective for caterpillars, one that's selective for beetles, and then another one for flies. So that's a selective. A non-selective would be something like 7, and you can see on the jug there, it kills over 500 listed pests. So it kills a wide range of insects, and like at the garden example, it can be great if you've got a lot of things eating your vegetables. And the chemical for that one, and I'm sure I'm going to mess this up, is zeta-cyperpermethrin. It's a broad spectrum insecticide. So that's our terminology. If you have any questions, go ahead and add them in the chat if you're watching it live. If you're watching it recorded, shoot me an email before we go on to our next section where we're going to talk about the label. All right, and I don't have any questions now, but feel free to add them as you come up with them. Now we're going to talk about the label, and I'm going to stick with 7. I'm not endorsing it, but it's a great product for this example because it's something that people are familiar with, but also it's a really good model for things you might see on the shelves of your local box stores. So this is just a picture of what it looks like on the front and the back. You'll notice on the front of the bottle, usually at the very bottom, it'll say what the active ingredient is, and it might be hard to see here. But the label isn't on the front. It's not kills over 500, and it's not the back either that says quick facts. While those can be helpful, that's not really what you're looking for. The label is going to be the booklet that's on the inside, and this is what page 1 of the label looks like. And so what you'll find are useful first aid information, environmental hazards, use restrictions, storage and disposal, and then specific use. And that's usually the bulk of it, is what you can spray it on, what it'll kill, and how much to spray, that kind of thing. Now, the general rule for the label, the general thing that I always say is the label is the law. And what that means is that you have to spray it exactly how the label says. So you can't spray it on something that's not on the label. You can't spray it to kill something that's not on the label. And you can't spray more than what the label says you can spray. Now, I've heard this quite a bit. People will say, well, following the label is just like speed limit signs. Nobody does it. Nobody gets caught. Everybody's driving 5 over the speed limit. Everybody's spraying a little bit more. And that's up to you. If you do that, just know you're breaking the law. There are environmental and other agencies that do track this stuff. Just know that you're doing something that's not only dangerous to yourself, but the environment and those around you. And so if you're spraying too high of a rate, you can injure yourself, you can injure your neighbors, kill their bushes, and then you will face legal action. So just remember, follow the label. It's really beneficial, and it's the law. So that's the soapbox for why you should follow the label. But we'll go through each of these and break down some of the more important things you'll find there as far as a safety perspective and kind of the usefulness of the label. So why you shouldn't just brush it off. And the first is first aid. It's on the first page. It's really important. You should always read this before you spray, because if you have any issues where you've swallowed it or you get it in your eyes, you might not have time to read it when you're trying to deal with this stuff. So make sure that you know, okay, if I get it in my eyes, I need to rinse my eyes for 15 to 20 minutes. The first aid is really helpful. It's always on the first page. A lot of times they'll have a hotline number to call if you do spray yourself or somebody else, and they have notes to physicians. So make sure that you follow that. Bring it with you to the doctor if you have to go to the doctor. But for the most part, the first aid has all the treatments that you can do there, and then someplace you might have to go if somebody swallows a whole lot of it, something like that. Just a general note, the things that homeowners can get are generally, and this is a big generalization, less toxic than something that, say, a farmer could get. That doesn't mean that they're not dangerous. Remember, all pesticides, that ending means that they kill, so be safe with them. But for the most part, they're fairly safe for people, and the first aid part is usually just rinsing off. The second part is environmental hazards, and this is crucial to make sure that you're spraying safely for the environment. This example here tells you what it can danger in the environment, but also how to prevent that. And so the first part I tried to highlight in red there, those different statements, and I don't know if y'all will be able to read them, but it says this pesticide is extremely toxic to fish, aquatic invertebrates, oysters, and shrimp. To protect the environment, don't allow it to run off into drains, that sort of thing. And only spray when rain isn't predicted for 24 hours. So if you follow those rules and that regulation, you won't have issues and you'll be applying it safely. So it's not going to damage those systems in the environment. At the bottom, it also says this product is highly toxic to bees. And again, it says don't apply when there's a chance of drift onto blooms, whether that's on your crops or on weeds nearby. So there are ways that you can spray these safely to reduce your risk. It's all about reducing risk of exposure to things in the environment, to yourself, so on. And then just a note on bees, a lot of people say, well, pesticides don't even tell you if they're toxic. They will all tell you if it's toxic to bees. And a lot of times it'll have a little picture on the bottom, a little diamond that's red. It'll have a bee that says it's toxic. So that's how you can know if it's potentially toxic for our bees or pollinators. So that's environmental stuff. The next one is yeast restrictions. It's usually somewhere around the first or second page. And it's, again, just some things that you can't do. This one says don't spray on pets, which kind of makes sense. And most of these things make sense, but read through those. There's really not too much to explain. They're pretty self-explanatory. But the next section is a little bit more confusing because it's the storage and disposal, and these change depending on the pesticide you have. For the storage, really, the general rule is you don't want them to be too cold or too hot. You want it to be right in the middle, that perfect Goldilocks bed there. If it's too cold, it'll freeze and then it won't work as well. If it's too hot, you might get vapor production, which can be more toxic to you, or it can lead to the chemical being not as effective. It also says to keep them in a cool, dry place. That's just the general rule. And keep them locked if you can. That way, nobody else gets into them that shouldn't be. For the disposal, you can, they vary between how you're supposed to dispose of them. If they're empty, most of the time, you triple rinse them. And that means you fill it up halfway with water, you rinse it out, and you do that 3 times. And then you can dispose of them in a trash can. That's how most pesticides can be disposed. If they're partially full, don't dump them out, keep them. And we have a household hazardous waste disposal day once a year. This year's was in March, and that's usually it's March or April. So just stay tuned for that. Check out our website. We'll post when they are. And you can just bring those products to us. There's no fee, and we'll dispose of them for you. Of course, if you have questions, you can always check the label. Each pesticide may be a little bit different on its storage and disposal, so check those out. And then the next section is specific use. And this is, like I said before, the bulk of the label. It's all of the information on what you can spray it on, what it'll kill, how much, and then how long you need to go before you get in there. These are different for every chemical. And even if it has the same active ingredient, it might have this part be different. So there might be some types of bifenthrin you can spray on your house for maybe termites, and another type that you can spray on your trees. Well, you might not be able to spray as much on your trees as on your house because you're not going to be eating your house like you would something on your tree, like a peach or something. So just make sure that you read through these for each one of your pesticides. And we'll go through each one of these little bullets now. So the first part, what you can use or what you can spray it on, this talks about the different vegetables for this product. And I've just highlighted the legumes there. So you can spray it on succulents, which is just like pea pods that you can eat, or you can spray it on dried ones. And it goes through all of the things that you can spray it on. There's also something called a re-entry interval, and that's how long you need to stay out of the area that you've just sprayed. Oftentimes it's 24 hours to 48 hours. But this one tells you 2 differences. One is 1 day for your succulents, and one is 21 days if it's dried. And there's differences there. For vegetables, it's not usually a re-entry, but it's a pre-harvest interval. And that's how long it takes before you can eat those, whatever it is, whether it's a pea or it's corn or something like that. So there's 2 differences there. And that's just to make sure that you don't poison yourself or anybody you'd be giving these to. The next section is what you can kill with it. And sometimes this is combined with the previous section. So if you're finding something to spray, maybe in an orchard, it might say in peaches, it'll control this disease, and this disease. In apples, it'll kill this, and this. But for this label, it breaks it down by what insects it'll kill. So it says true bugs, and then it lists them all. So you have to make sure that you're really identifying your insects, and that'll help you to know if it's going to control it. But also, if you see something like ants, maybe is what you want to get rid of in your garden, and it's not on this list, that means you can't spray ants with this product, or you'd be breaking the law. So just know that. You also might not get good control if you're spraying something that's not on that list. And then the last thing is the rate. This can be in a number of different places. For this specific label, it's at the very top of the specific use, and it says that you can put down 4 ounces per gallon of water. Sometimes it'll say per how much water. Sometimes it'll say per amount of area, so per 1,000 square foot or per acre. It depends. And if you're getting something that's already pre-mixed, a lot of times it'll say you can spray however many 1,000 square feet every 2 months or something like that. So just make sure you look for that. Sometimes it'll be with each specific area. So it'll say you can spray this in woody trees, and you can spray this much, or you can spray it in your lawn and you can spray this much. So just make sure that you're looking for the label rate. You don't want to spray too high because you might be damaging the environment or even the plants you're spraying. So some insecticides that you spray on plants can burn up the plant if you put too much on it. So you don't want to do that. But you also don't want to put too little because you might have issues where you get disease resistance. So you spray it on a weed and you didn't put out enough and some survive, and more survive the more you spray. So you just want to make sure that you're following the label rate. So that's the label in a nutshell. It was kind of quick. So if you have any questions, go ahead and add them to the chat or send me an email. You'll get more familiar with the labels the more you look at them. So I just recommend looking at them for some of the products that you might have around your house, or just going to some of the box stores and taking a look to see. And that'll be a great way to kind of introduce yourself. But it doesn't look like we have any questions now. So we're going to move on to the next part where I talk about this, the Eggcam Manual. The link to that is in the description. Hopefully I'll be able to bring it up now. Or soon. So this is what it'll look like when you get to the Eggcam Manual. It's an NC State Extension publication. You can find it online. You can also buy it, and you can get a copy like I have, and the link to that is here. And it's about $40. I don't recommend to buy it unless you're spraying a lot of chemicals because they change every year. Now they have recommendations on how to use it, and they have useful phone numbers. So they have them for poison control. They have them for the Department of Ag and pesticide disposal. And then we have the table of contents, and this is where you'll find everything you need. Most everything you'll need will be either insect control, which is section 5, chemical weed control, so this is for your herbicides, section 7, or section 10, which is disease control. So we're going to talk about insect control, and this is what it'll look like. You'll get a picture of the manual, and you can click that to make it full screen. I don't know how well y'all can see this, but I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. But the reason I recommend using this manual, rather than saying, well, just go out and buy a case of 7, is because you need to know the chemical name for the compounds, because the product names change all the time. If you're getting something like 7 from the store, we talked about the 7 product we showed was zeta-cypermethrin. But if we look here and we scroll down and we go to Home and Lawns and we click there, this is what will come up. And so this is for insect control. You can see these gray areas will show the different types of insects you have. So we'll go down, this is white grubs here. And then it'll tell you your chemicals in the column on the left. In the middle, we'll say how much. And then you'll see the precautions on the far right. But we talked about 7 being zeta-cypermethrin. If I said go and spray 7, this says that 7 is also carbaryl. So those are 2 different chemicals. They might have 2 different labels. And so you just have to make sure that you know exactly what you're spraying and if it's labeled properly. So I use this booklet and I find the chemicals and I write them down on a piece of paper. And then I go to the store and I look for those chemicals. And then I check the back and see, okay, this carbaryl says I can spray it for white grub. So that's something that I can use. So that's what I do. That's how I use this guide. For the insects, it goes by insect. But we'll go to another guide here in a second. So we just went back to the guide. And now we're going to go down and look at weed control because it's set up a little bit different than the insect control for the insecticides. So again, you'll see this table of contents that you can scroll through. The yellow means that you can click on it. And we'll go for lawns and turf. And so this one isn't broken down by the weed, but it's broken down by the type of control. So if you put down a pre-emergent, which is something that controls weeds before they emerge, that's the first section, and then it goes down through the weeds. And then it has post-emergent, so once those weeds have come up. And you'll see again on the far left what type of herbicide it is. You'll see how much to put down in the middle, and then any precautions. And the precautions are really important for your herbicide because there may be something that you can spray on Bermuda that you can't spray if you have a zoysia or a St. Augustine lawn. So that's the Eggcam. That's the Eggcam guide. It's really helpful if you have any questions about what you can spray. It can be difficult to look through though, and you have to know exactly what you want to spray. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you can take a picture. Say you've got an insect, just take a picture of it from the top and the bottom if you can, and send it to us. And you can find our email on our website, and we'll help you identify it. Or if you have any questions about this guide, just shoot me an email. Of course, I can make recommendations too. So there's that. But before we go today, if you have any questions, type them down in the chat or send me an email. And check out this last slide here. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. This is what we're going to be doing tomorrow and live from Currituck Extension. It's our freezer jam class with Olivia. She'll be making strawberry freezer jam. And so we've got all of the things that you might need for that. The strawberries, sugar, pectin, and water. And then you'll need some jars. And so if you want to do a cook along with her, there's all of the instructions for that. That'll be tomorrow at live from Currituck Extension at 11:30. So definitely check that out. I'll leave it up while I finish. But if you would, make sure that you follow us on our social media and subscribe to our channel, click the little bell button, and then fill out our evaluation to help us know if we're doing a good job or things that we could change, that sort of thing. But it doesn't look like we have any questions here. So again, if you think of something after watching this, shoot me an email. But if not, we hope to see you tomorrow at 11:30 from live from Currituck Extension.